So first, let me start with a little bit about myself by way of a story, and this is a lead-in to another way to think about mindfulness. I think it was 15 years ago, we all met over lunch to talk about what we wanted to say and how we wanted to work together doing this. 15 years ago, I had the enormous good time of having Jeremy, who was not yet an illustrious business school professor, but was himself a graduate student, come and interview me. And I was not yet an executive coach or a meditation teacher. I was basically fresh out of the Zen monastery, same Zen monastery that Mark used to run. And I was a little disoriented in trying to find my way in the world and get my feet on the ground. And he came to ask me some questions for his research about, well, what are the benefits of doing that kind of deep and intensive practice? And I happily shared my experience. And we got all the way to the end of the interview and realized that the recorder hadn't been turned on. And so we had a moment, right? What could we do? We could freak out. We could say, oh, forget it. And I said, well, let's do it again. And so we did. And we had the same conversation a second time. And so that story is by way of saying a little bit about myself and my background. So I come out of a long history of many years of deep meditative practice in a spiritual tradition, in a monastic training center. And fast forward 5 years from when I met with Jeremy, and I was now being invited to go into organizations and offer that. So how do you do that? How could I do that in a way that was beneficial? This was long before the mindfulness wave hit. Right? So nobody knew what mindfulness was. And like many people have said, I had an advocate, a guy inside a company who was running the IT organization, who was a meditator and said, come do a day with my leadership team. And I said, okay. And I read everything I could, and I talked to everybody I knew to try to figure out how I'm going to talk to these people. I had no idea. And one thing led to another, and I started teaching mindfulness classes, and then he came to me at some point and said, these classes are good, but, and I hope this will speak to the interest of some of you, he said, I want to create a culture of mindfulness. And then he said, how do you do that? As if I would know, right? It was like, I said, I have no idea how you would do that, right? Which I didn't. And he said, great, let's make it up. And so that became what next year will be going into its 10th year of what's called the Personal Excellence Program. So if you want to know more about the Personal Excellence Program, please come to one of the workshops tomorrow. What I'd like to do today, in the time that I have, is introduce you to one of the key practices from that program. And part of the reason I want to introduce it is because we've been talking an awful lot about mindfulness, but I think it's really useful to actually do a little bit of it. Several people have said, once you get a taste, right? So many of you have a mindfulness practice, but I want us to actually practice together a little bit this particular version. And this, not that my version's better than somebody else's, again, but I think that one of the key pieces that I want to illuminate is that this was my way of translating a very kind of deep practice. And in particular, I'm going to use one Pali word here for my time on stage. The practice I'm going to introduce you to comes out of what's called the Satipatthana Sutta, 4 foundations of mindfulness. It's the roots of where the word and the whole mindfulness movement come from. Sati is a Pali word that's translated in English as mindfulness. Right? So like many of you have said, I knew I can't go do that. I can't go walk in and say, let's all study the Pali Sutta. No, it wasn't going to work. So what I did do was introduce a model that came into this PEP program, which wasn't a mindfulness program. So many of you have asked about this. This is a group coaching process. It's also sort of under the rubric of leadership development. And we talk about growing the whole person. And Jeremy was speaking about our head-centered culture. This was a model that pretty much instantly everybody gets in the business world. Like, we walk around like this, right? And so the model of growing the whole person, this was the language that we used, was about cultivating all three centers, head, heart, body, of intelligence. That each center of ourselves, of our intelligence, has wisdom to offer. Thinking has wisdom to offer, so does feeling. We know this now as emotional intelligence. So does the body. Remember the body? It's an important piece, right? So we get to have an opportunity to be able to cultivate both language for and access to all of these different dimensions of our experience so that we have more insight, we know more about who we are, we understand ourselves better, and basically, this is going to be the sort of punchline, and then we'll do a little bit of the practice. You could think about mindfulness is fundamentally about shifting your relationship or cultivating a relationship, period. So here, what we're doing is inviting people into a process in which they're developing a relationship with their whole self. They're developing a relationship with their mind, not just being caught in the monkey mind, as you said. We're inviting them to develop a relationship with their heart and a relationship with their body. And oh, by the way, when we do that, we can then begin to develop a different quality of relationships with each other, which is an integral part of the process, that it's not just done solo and in isolation. So, if you will indulge me, I know it's the end of the day and there's always the risk of falling asleep. This will be we'll do a very short guided practice. So as others have said, just either let your eyes close as a way to allow your attention to come in, or if you don't want to close your eyes, no problem, just have a soft gaze down. And take a few deep, full breaths. Now imagine that your awareness, your attention, was like a beam of light. And you could turn that light and look inwardly. And I'd invite you first to look, to see, to listen to whatever you notice in the head center, the thinking center. For many of us, there's a kind of commentary or chatter, words, stories, assessment, opinion in the mind. Please don't judge. Don't try to stop it or change it. Just notice, allow, whatever's there to be there, and be known. And now letting your awareness, your attention, that beam of light move from the head down into the heart center, the center of the chest. You might imagine just for a moment that you could breathe in and out of the heart. And in the same way, turning your attention, tuning in, listening in to the heart, and noticing, is there a mood, a feeling, an attitude? Again, without judgment or trying to change your experience, just allowing, receiving. And finally, letting your attention drop once again down into the belly, the body center. I like to imagine I could fill my whole body with my awareness. and listening in and noticing what's happening in the body now. What's the energy of the body like? Maybe you feel tired, heavy, dense, or spacious and light. You may be aware of the aliveness of the body, tingling, flowing, aching, pulsing. Or perhaps there's a sense of stillness. Just allowing your experience to arise and be known just as it is. And letting your eyes open to come back into the room. So we call this process that I just walked you through, we don't use the word mindfulness at all. We call it a 3-center check-in. And it's now being used by thousands of people across the globe who use it themselves, who do it at the beginning of a meeting, who do it at the beginning of a presentation, individually and collectively. And the part that I don't have time for, because I'm getting the 1 minute left sign flashed, is the relational piece. So this is about beginning to develop a relationship to yourself, not about having a particular kind of experience, right? But developing a sensitive, interested relationship with your own head, heart, body. And in practice, what we do is we have people then turn and talk to somebody else and share what's happening for you in your head, in your heart, in your body. This is a scary, as Jeremy said, it can be a scary thing to do. It takes a lot of courage. What we found is that when people begin to develop and deepen a relationship with themselves and then begin to share from that place, that the quality of the relationship changes with yourself, but also with your colleagues, with your coworkers. The quality of the conversations change as the quality of the relationships change, and that changes the culture. So when I was asked originally, I want you to come do a mindfulness day for my leadership team, now teach mindfulness classes, now I wanted you to create a culture of mindfulness. I didn't know how to do that. But if we're going to create cultures of mindfulness, we have to understand the relational impact of the power of these practices. That it's not, as many people have said, just something you do with your eyes closed, right? On a cushion or in a cave or in a mountain or in a monastery somewhere. But it's also something that as we begin to connect with ourselves more deeply, we can connect with one another more deeply. So we call this process vertical development, right? We're moving from the head, literally head, heart, body. And we as human beings have the opportunity to move in 2 dimensions. We move a lot in the horizontal plane. It's about getting across the surface. Speed, efficiency, effectiveness, data, not really important, right? But there's something else. Because I think many of us know that no matter how much of that we get through, has anybody noticed you get to the end of your to-do list and what happens? More stuff, right? It's endless. So when we're talking about this kind of deepening of our connection with ourselves and each other, we're also talking about deepening a level of satisfaction, real satisfaction, not just kind of a happy experience that is going to be fleeting. So real satisfaction comes from this other dimension in which we drop below the surface into the moment, into the present, into the here and now, which allows us contact with a whole other dimension of who we are. And from that place, we can engage in a new way. So if we had more time, I'd have you turn and talk to each other. But I would invite you to play with this and try it on Monday for yourself, with someone else you know, or in some group where it feels safe and appropriate to try it. So thank you very much for entertaining this and indulging me. Thank you.